Our speaker this evening is Mark Allan Kaplan, Ph.D. He's an award-winning filmmaker, preeminent theorist, and practitioner of the application of integral theory to the cinematic arts. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I always like to begin by saying that I'm a stutterer, so if my speech gets a little strange, you'll have to just roll with it. But this is why I'm here, too. As a child, I couldn't speak, and I tried to find ways to communicate besides speaking. So I tried drawing, I tried photography, I tried everything, and then in high school I took a film class, and I found my voice. I made a film, and it made people laugh and cry, and I could speak. So that's really, what started all this. And I went to all the big film schools and studied with the masters, and but I've always kind of was hungry for how to speak more clearly with cinema, because it was my voice. So I studied and studied about its psychological effects and its physiological effects, and how colors and shapes and forms affect us. And I studied from some of the old masters who knew this stuff, handed down from some of the great theorists. Then I got into the film industry. Actually, my graduate film at the American Film Institute, I made a dramatic film about a boy who stuttered. So it was kind of like my vision quest to complete this mission to speak. And it won all these film festivals. It won the San Francisco Film Festival back in '85, I think. And I got swept into Hollywood. Like 3 months after film school, I was house sitting for this movie star in this palatial estate. I was having lunch at the Polo Lounge. I was meeting, so it was just, and I had a spiritual awakening and realized how much of what I was going through was an illusion, at least for me. And I packed up everything I owned. I went to Europe and sought the meaning of life. Ended up studying psychology and consciousness, and found my way to integral theory and started experimenting with integral approaches to film. I always like to also start with honoring the first person to use the phrase integral cinema, Germaine Dulac, 1921-22. She coined that phrase, and many believe she was the first feminist filmmaker. And according to my research, the first integral filmmaker. So, and I went to 2 film schools and never heard her name. So I give honor to her every time I talk. It's a great lady. Anyway, so tonight I wanted to start with giving you a little experience of the structures of consciousness as they are embedded in the cinema. And in my research, I discovered that the different stages of development that we go through as individuals, as cultures, and societies are embedded in our art, and especially in film, in the moving image. And I guess I should say first off, when I say cinema or film, whatever, I'm kind of holding it as the moving image in all its evolving forms. Because cinema at first just meant the moving image. It's kinetic imagery. And now the moving image is everywhere. It's on our phones. It's, it's embedded in our whole life. And its impact is great beyond what we can really fully comprehend. It's not just the stories, it's not just the ideas, but it's actually the structure and the way it communicates affects us. When I was at the American Film Institute, my mentor, Robert Weiss, had been in the industry at that time for 50 years. He edited Citizen Kane, which we're going to see a clip from. And he really helped to start me on this path too, because he said in his years, he saw that the audience and the cinema co-evolved. That when he started, they had to show, if someone was like, if you wanted to have a film where somebody was heading to somebody else's house for a social event or something, you had to show them leaving their house, getting in a car, driving, getting out of the car, walking up the stairs, you had to show everything, or else they wouldn't comprehend what was going on. And now we can cut
Because it's a kind of like
from someone in their house to someone in someone else's house, and it's fine, because we've evolved with the language of the cinema. As the cinema was experimenting, our consciousness was evolving with it. And which is first, we don't know. It's kind of this great interplay between our consciousness and and cinematic consciousness. So actually, how a film is communicating to us affects how we think and perceive in the world as well. So, in the beginning here, I want to take you through some of the first films in history. And besides each and every film having different structures of consciousness, and worldviews and stages of development, I found that the medium itself goes through those stages. And the stages I'm using, for those of you who don't know, real quick, integral. If there's anyone here who is new to integral, anyone new to integral? Okay. Integral is a stage of development. It's a structure of consciousness. And there's different structures of consciousness, and it's directly related to cultures and how cultures evolve through different stages. But it's also related to how we evolve. So for example, we evolve through different stages of circles of care and concern, from egocentric to ethnocentric to relationships to social-centric to the greater society to the world, and finally to cosmocentric to all beings, which is integral. It's related to integral. So anyways, integral theory just tries to capture that structure of consciousness for us so we could understand it and work with it and use it. And so films will have the different structures of consciousness, and I found that as every moving image medium, like film or television when it started, or video games, or now we're on the verge of virtual reality, it always starts at the bottom of the cycle. So you have archaic, which is the bottom. I'll go through these as we head through. I'm going to cycle through the stages periodically as we go through, while we're watching the films, and then on the slides too. But basically it's archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral. And as the medium evolved, it moved through these stages, and the audience evolved with it. So now we're going to start, and I want you to just imagine you're back in the late 1800s. There's no cars. Most people have no electricity. Horse and buggy, trains is it. There's talk of electricity coming to your area or whatever. So it's like this is a whole different world. And you have photographs that you've seen in the newspaper. All right? But you have to understand that at this time, the only kind of entertainment that came close was plays or theater. But it was still that you were seeing other people doing things on a stage, but it was still in your reality. Okay? So no one had seen this before. All right? So the first film is basically a shot of a horse. Leland Stanford paid for this. He wanted to find out if a horse's hooves all left the ground. And they found out yes. But the key here is that at the beginning of film, we used it for just observing things. You just pointed the camera and like they shot a train moving down the tracks. They shot a horse moving. They shot people coming out of a factory. There was no intervention of consciousness. This is archaic level. It's just like looking at the world. There's no awareness yet. Okay. So next, we have magical stage. What happens in the magical stage? We start playing with the medium. What can it do? What can it do? And this French magician, filmmaker, Georges Millet, accidentally discovered that if you stop the film and start it again and move an object out of frame, the object will disappear. So we have, and voila, the magical stage. The first special effect. This is the first special effect. Of course, he's got to add some fun here. So now this period is the magical period where they start playing with it, discovering what it can do, appearing, disappearing, all this stuff that, And then the next stage is mythic, stories, and power. We have the great train robbery here. Here we go. To get the full story. Sneaking on a train. We've got right and wrong, bad guy, good guy, archetypes, So this is mythic. This is the mythic level, as embedded in the structure. It's after this film, you have films like The Birth of a Nation. Besides the high drama, there comes violence and prejudice and all this stuff that's coming in. The psyche starts to get really active. You can see that it's starting to wake up the cinematic consciousness. So next is the rational. And the rational is documentaries, reality. So it's like once we discover in a medium its power, the next thing that seems to happen is we try to make it more realistic. We go into realism. And the birth of realism in the silent period anyways was with this film, San Francisco, Trip Down Market Street. This is 4 days before the San Francisco earthquake. Of course, the sound was added later, because these were silent films. This is the actual experience of what it was like on a trolley car in 1906. Now, this is considered what they call the first structural film, which is there was an intent to capture an experience. What is the experience of riding down the trolley, down Market Street? What they didn't anticipate was the earthquake, and that this street would be lost as it is. And all of a sudden it became a historical document. 5 days later was the birth of documentary. Because now we had a document of something that was lost. And it started filmmakers thinking about using it as this witnessing of life and trying to capture life, not in an unconscious way, as an archaic, where I'm just pointing the camera and shooting something. It's how can I capture an experience? How can I share an idea? And so that's kind of the rational It's the realism, it's capturing reality, you know, through conscious effort. Next is pluralistic level, and this is a trailer for a silent film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a German expressionistic film. Now, all of a sudden we get subjective experience trying to be expressed in lighting, in images, in the sets. Subjective reality trying to be made concrete. Expressionism and pluralistic stage, you basically have relativism, subjectivity. You know, after the rational reality, there comes this I'm searching for how can we use this medium to express the interiors, yeah? The subjective experience, you know, and German Expressionism was the first to kind of, they created sets that were kind of emotional experiences and trying to translate that. So now we come to Integral, Germaine Dulac. Very end of the silent film era, she made a film called The Seashell and the Clergyman. And we're just going to show a couple clips to you. Here, we've gone through the different stages as the medium has evolved. And her film, as an integral film, one of the keynotes that I believe, from my research so far, one of the things that integral films will tend to do is actually try to capture the evolution of consciousness itself. So if anyone has seen Groundhog Day, the evolution of the character from egocentric to ethnocentric to sociocentric to world-centric, there's an evolutionary arc that most integral films will have, that they're actually trying to capture this process. And she was the first to try that. And now this is avant-garde, so it's a little out there. And it's raw. Don't forget the silent period. This is still experimenting. The cinema is still raw, you know. And for us, see also, for us, when we're watching some of these old films, it could feel slow to us. But remember that for people back then, their attention, I'm not saying attention span, but their capacity to absorb information. This is what Bob Weiss said, that over time he experienced the audience being able to absorb information faster and faster. And so films could get faster and faster. But still, films are slow to us in this period, for most of us, you know. Especially if you don't have the sound.
What year is this film, please?
This is a tricky one. Some people say 1926, some 1927, and some 1928. So, it did premiere in 1928 in Paris, and there was a riot. So that's a great start for integral cinema.
There was a riot?
There was a riot at the theater, yes. Supposedly it was between people who were her fans and people who were the fans of the writer. And then there were people who were just upset because it was nonsensical, or, you know. It was interesting, back then people took the cinema very seriously, you know, especially in France. Well, they still do in France. They honor cinema as a high art, you know, and back then especially too, they did. And so it was like, it was a break from the art. So some people had a problem with that. The music is obviously added later, but she was very into music and had it playing. And I'll talk about the stages after. I want you to experience the film, these clips. Now I have to talk though, because this is, now we've reached the integral stage. Welcome to the four quadrants. And for those of you who don't know, the four quadrants are part of integral theory. This is over 50 years before Ken put it together. Basically, in that film, obviously I just took some clips. The beginning of walking through the cave and the tunnels is kind of raw, it's kind of archaic. Then we enter a room where he's doing alchemy, magical, the smoke appears. And then what do we have? The king and queen on a throne, mythic. Right? He turns into a chess piece and walks down a hallway of like a chessboard, rational. Then we have a wedding, a union of opposites, and the wedding. And he even has his head in a globe, in the world globe. I don't know if you saw that. Right? And then the climax of the film is the four quadrants. And if you saw the whole film, what's going on is that in the upper left there is the cave that they keep going back to in his dreams. So that's his interior. And then there's a castle in the upper right, the objective. It's an object. And then those two are multiplied in the lower quadrants with water. And so you get multiple castles and multiple caves. This was in the late 20s. So this is, pretty amazing. So now we have both, we've seen how mediums, different structures of communicating evolves through the stages, and how an individual film can capture the stages in it. Yeah.
Does Ken Wilber acknowledge the woman who made this film?
Oh, he was blown away.
Good.
He loved it.
Good.
He loved it. Yeah. Yeah. So here we have, just to give you an example of how altitudes or stages of development can be seen in cinematic works. And there's a lot here, I'll just give you an example. So here we have the spectrum of colors in integral theory, where you use that. But basically, here's the worldviews. We go from archaic, magical, mythic, rational, pluralistic, integral, and I got super integral or transpersonal. This is in cultural worldview. And then in parallel to that, we have circles of care and concern. So like in Groundhog Day, egocentric is parallel to magical, ethnocentric to mythic, sociocentric to rational, world-centric to pluralistic, and so on. So basically, then we break it down that these altitudes can be expressed in the story, in the text, through things like the circle of care and concern is part of the story. It's your character development, right? You've got a story event polarity, like mythic, you have right and wrong. It's like a polarity pattern in a mythic film. In an integral film, the polarity pattern, it tends to be greater or lesser perspectival depth and span. So it's all about, is this perspective a greater span or depth than a different one? The truth value patterns, okay? A pluralistic film will have relative truth as like its truth. Truth is relative.
How often do you sleep together?
Do you have sex often?
Hardly yet, but maybe 3 times a week.
Constantly. I'd say 3 times a week.
Whereas a rational film will have objective truth.
It'll probably be a factory by the river.
An industrial worker.
So anyways, there's more there. There's the visual image expressions, like for example, rational expressed through realism, cinematic realism. Okay. There's sound. There's set and setting. So connected to the altitudes, if you study integral theory, you know that in the lower right quadrant, or the systems quadrant, that it's stages of techno-economic development. For example, the rational stage is parallel to the industrial or corporate state level, and the magical is connected to tribal. So in a film like Avatar, you beautifully have the tribal, you have the magical tribal, you have the mythic military warriors, that structure of consciousness. You have the rational business person, it's all about the money. So you have all of these different structures of consciousness represented in like the social structures. And one of the reasons why we could say that this film was so successful is it integrated all the different structures of consciousness of the audience around the world. And when we look at the most successful films of all time, they actually tend to have multiple structures of consciousness that can tap into different audiences. Here we go to what we saw, the evolution of cinematic altitudes, and we have the archaic, the magical, the mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral that we talked about. And if we go to the next one, we go into the seashell and the clergyman, and we have those stages. So we have both the structures of the medium and then inside of the films themselves. Now, worldviews. Looking here at a more modern work, if anyone has seen the film Inception, which is a modern integral work, they use basically levels of a dream world, different levels of a dream that represent different structures of consciousness. So the deeper you go, you're going down the spiral. Basically, you could see things like, for example, in the archaic level, it's the dream level in deep limbo, where it's like the characters are hardly conscious. They can hardly function. When they get to the magic level, they could create worlds. They create anything they want. They build worlds and destroy worlds. And it's magical. Then at the mythic level, they're tasked with attacking a fortress. Mythic. At the rational level, they're moving through a maze of corridors in a modern hotel in the dream world. In the pluralistic level, it's always about, there's all these various people around the people who are dreaming, and they represent different aspects of their psyche. So you have the pluralistic dimension of the psyche. And then the integral is the waking state, where you can see it all. So that's a modern example of how it's embedded and how an integral film can communicate these multiple levels. Now we go to the circles of care and concern. The seashell and the clergyman, parallel to the magical, the character is egocentric. Then he goes through ethnocentric with relationships. And sociocentric here, he's going through the streets of Paris, trying to find other people, and his body dissolves into other bodies as he passes them. So he's trying to get into the society. Yeah. Then there's the world-centric, which of course he's in the world globe. And at the end of the film, he drinks from the seashell, his own beingness melts into the liquid, into the seashell, and then he drinks it. So he drinks himself. And there's like, almost like stars shimmering in it. So he's drinking the cosmic soup. And now we go to Groundhog Day with a similar pattern, although it's not quite avant-garde. Phil, of course, starts egocentric. He even uses the word egocentric, or somebody does. Ethnocentric, when he finally, instead of treating the female character as an object, trying to capture her, trying to figure out a way to get her, finally, in his not being able to get her and failing, he finally sees her as a human being. Yeah, and that's his shift into ethnocentric. And sociocentric, he starts to care about other people in this town and connect with them. And at the end, it's like he sees the world. It's like, oh my God, And cosmocentric is very interesting. In some films, the character doesn't have to reach cosmocentric. Some films, we become the witness. And the filmmaker puts us into the cosmocentric integral seat. That we are witness, we become conscious of the stages of development. We become conscious of it. We're observing the evolution. So, now the question is, what makes a movie integral? So I've done research. I started with Germaine Dulac's writings, what she thought. Well, I actually started with Wilbur, with Ken, obviously integral. And then Germaine Dulac, and then I discovered that Sergei Eisenstein, a Russian film theorist, was actually integral, that he split up cinema into 4 quadrants: text, image, sound, and time, which was an epiphany for me. That's like, I finally understood his theories, like, amazingly. And Gene Gebser, who I have to pay homage to him too, because these stages we're using are from him. Archaic, magic, mythic, rational, and integral. He didn't actually have pluralistic, because at that time we didn't have the research that kind of was able to separate out pluralistic from integral. All the tests I've done, I've tested films and tried to do it, and this is what I have so far. Now this research is ongoing, so this is my best guess now from the films I found. Number 1, the exploration and integration of multiple evolving dimensions and perspectives of lesser and greater depth and span. It's a lot. Basically, multiple dimensions and perspectives, greater depth and span. These films tend to have that. They tend to try to integrate multiple dimensions of existence, multiple perspectives, and they're integrating them not in a pluralistic way, which is, it's all the same, it's all relative, it's all equal. It's qualifying it that some perspectives are more accurate than others.
Door. Find another door.
Number 2, the concretion of abstract and interior dimensions and perspectives, such as time and interiority, the subjective experience, but doing that in the service of the evolutionary arc. So it's all about evolution, it's all about development. That tends to be the integral structure. Groundhog Day is a great example, of development. And the concretion of time, Groundhog Day, it's in the story that he's stuck in a time loop. So the clock keeps coming up. So that's a concretion of time. We're seeing time itself repeated. Another one is the integration of masculine and feminine through a synthesis and balancing of the forces of agency and communion in the service of evolutionary growth and development. But, this is a good one, it's easy to think of the masculine and feminine in terms of male characters and female characters. that an integral film should have equal to characters, or or if a film has a main male character, it's not integral enough, and all that. But Germaine Dulac, her main character was a man, and also she and other feminist filmmakers kind of focus on not just the personification of the masculine and the feminine, but the essence of masculine and feminine. In integral theory, we talk about agency and communion. So an integral film, even if it's an action film, will tend to try to integrate agency and communion. They'll try to balance character development and action.
Tell me everything's gonna be okay.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Even though it may be a guy film on the surface or a girl film on the surface, they'll tend to try to integrate those two forces equally. And for an evolutionary story, event, or character progression, that is basically, traditionally, stories are about conflict resolution. Most stories. You've got the climax is usually the conflict resolution. Well, integral films will tend to put the evolutionary arc and development equal to or greater than conflict resolution. So the conflict resolution will actually be in service of the evolutionary arc, usually. 5, the evolutionary impulse as a driving force or causality pattern. The valuing of truth that is qualified. Again, basically, truth is like, yes, each stage of development has its own truth, but some are more accurate than others in certain perspectival fields. And they'll try to embrace that or capture that. One more. A cosmocentric circle of care and concern that suggests an awareness, integration, and embracing of all existence. That's what I got so far. Now, not every film that's on the integral film list has all of these. I think what we'll find over time is that some films are almost integral, and some films are at the beginning of it, and some are like hardcore integral, and some maybe are going super integral. So there's probably the difference between Groundhog Day and 2001, which is an integral film. You've got, you have different. In Groundhog Day, the key integral element is the character's evolutionary arc. Whereas in 2001, it's evolution itself of humanity. So you've got different ways of expressing it, and in Kubrick's film, we don't see any evolutionary development in a character. I would say that Groundhog Day is probably at the cusp of integral, because it only has that one level. That Germaine Dulac felt that one of the key marks of integral cinema is that you integrate the language of the cinema itself with what you're saying. And 2001 did that masterfully. Groundhog Day, less so. So it's still a work in progress, but these are pretty good indications that there's integral happening here now. I have to always say, just because a film has integral elements does not mean it's higher quality than other films. Okay, artistic quality, that's something else, or even how well it's made. You could have a masterpiece of pluralistic cinema and an okay integral film. It's not about that. It's just about the perspectival field that's in the film. It's structure of consciousness. It still may not be a great film. Yeah.
You said something about integrating the language of cinema. Can you say more about that?
Yes. The tradition that I was trained in, that I talked about, is the idea that drama is not the language of cinema. Drama is from theater and all that. film, according to Germain Dulac, is closer to poetry or music. And it should be treated as such. There's a language of its own. So like when we saw the German Expressionist film, they were attempting to integrate subjective experience into the actual language of cinema. The shots, this tradition, starting with Eisenstein, it explored how pacing and color and shape affects the audience. So if I want to make a film that helps people shift from mythic to rational, let's say, then I could use not just a story to tell it, but I could take the structure of the film, how the shots are. I could do a modern environment, here, and a mythic environment here. I could use set and setting. I could use realism cinematography in the rational, and I could use mythic in the, low angles, deep shadows, black and white, like stark contrast, mythic, and transition those as well. So if Sergei Eisenstein had this idea called synchronization of the senses. And he believed that if you can synchronize the story with the images, with the sound, and with time, which is the temporal structuring, the accumulation of shots over time, if you synchronize them all together, then you could create lived experience in your audience. If you're trying to say something, of course he was doing it because he wanted to create a political film. This is powerful stuff, and it has been used for good and for not so good. There's a film called Triumph of the Will that many historians say that it helped Hitler come to power. One film. So this medium is very powerful, and I'm hoping that with applying integral to film that we could understand its power even more and use it for higher purposes more. There we go, the Integral Cinema Top 10 list. Now, this list, I had to put it in historical order because for me, each of these films has helped to shift cinematic consciousness forward. And each film builds off the other. So I feel like it's important to give homage to the progression because each filmmaker has been coming off of what has been before them. So that's kind of like my order. I am not doing an order which this is the best integral film. I have my personal favorites, but that's about my taste and all that too. So it's like these films are the 10 most significant integral films in the evolutionary arc bringing us towards integral cinema. And which I also hope to talk about that we are now seeing an increase in integral works that started in 1999 and is progressing.
What started in 1999?
1999, two films, The Matrix and The Sixth Sense. Those two films changed cinematic consciousness forever. The Sixth Sense, everyone who saw it was blown away by the ending. This is a work that masterfully used holons and holonic structuring. Holons, everything's a whole part.
I see dead people.
So it created two storylines, one nested inside the other, that were hints all the way along, and then the underneath story came up at the end. Now what happened is that the cinematic audience after this, and after The Matrix, which took reality and twisted it and made us question what's real and what isn't real, those two affected our consciousness.
To wake from that dream.
And affected cinematic consciousness that if you look at films after those two films, there's an increase in multi-level storytelling. After this, you'll get TV shows like Lost. You'll get films like Inception that's taking you through 4 or 5 levels of dreams simultaneously intercutting, and we're following. All of that is owed to these films that brought integral structures into the popular stream in a big way. So, anyway, so we start with Seashell and the Clergyman to give honor to the first that I've found so far. I have to, I haven't, as I was saying to someone during the break, I haven't seen every film on the planet from every country, so just the films that I've tested.
Why not?
Although I have seen a lot of films, because going to those film schools for the first few years, it was like I saw maybe like 8 to 10 films per week, so for many years. So I've seen a lot, but number 2, Citizen Kane. Most film theorists considered that to be the greatest film in film history. And it was a lot of advances, but one of its big advances that you understand from an integral perspective when you look at it is that it was the first film to concretize the individual evolutionary process. You have perhaps the first evolutionary character sequence in history with the breakfast scene. I don't know how many of you have seen this film.
Do you know how long you kept me waiting last night while you went to the newspaper for 10 minutes? What do you do on a newspaper?
It takes a relationship at a breakfast table through a series over the years, and we see the deconstruction of the relationship in 3 minutes.
Incredible atrocity yesterday, Charles.
And that was a big, huge leap in cinematic expression and in consciousness. And you could see how that may affect the audience. That they're actually experiencing, they're seeing a bigger picture of a relationship, how it changes over time, how their little looks and expressions can affect the other person over time. So then we have 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is the next huge leap in cinematic consciousness. And it's so integral that at the end we have the cosmocentric child floating above the earth. And this film, it kind of took this experience of evolution itself, of where we come from, where we're going, and it kind of gave us a visceral witnessing of the evolutionary arc of humanity. Groundhog Day. I put that here in the progression because it really kind of took the integral into the popular, first of all, there's very few comedies on the list. I wish there was more, but comedy is very hard to do anyways, normally. So it's really kind of the first integral comedy.
He might be okay. Well, no, probably not now.
It had an effect on the cinema. After Groundhog Day, the style of the repetition of time became a big thing. This last year we had The Edge of Tomorrow, which some critics called it Groundhog Day on steroids. And we had Source Code, which was another time loop film. All of this started with Groundhog Day. So it affected our awareness of time as well. Then, of course, we have the Matrix trilogy and The Sixth Sense, which we're talking about. Now, the Matrix trilogy I put as one film, because in an integral film, if there's a trilogy, if there's several films, you have to look at it as one, because the evolutionary arc won't be complete until you've seen them all. If it's an integral film, yeah.
So Doctor Who comes to mind in this, and I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are in that, because that's many storylines going on. Have you watched Doctor Who much?
It's on the list, and I've watched some of it, but I'm not complete yet. And in the television series, I have to watch the whole series before I could. So I have to watch it all.
Like 20 years worth.
Yes, so it's on my list, but it's going to take a while.
Okay.
I put The Matrix into the Sixth Sense. I put The Matrix first because it came out 3 months before. So, but they really were neck and neck. You know. Number 7 is the Dark Knight trilogy, which changed the face of superhero films, but also it is really the first cinematic work, all 3 films if you take them together, that attempt to concretize tetraevolution. Tetraevolution, evolution across 4 dimensions and perspectives. And it's also the evolution of an archetype. You've got a character, the Bruce Wayne character, the culture around him, the social structure, and the object of the archetype evolving from archaic to cosmocentric, from archaic to integral, and from egocentric to cosmocentric. If you track the whole film, and even the city of Gotham from the 3 films evolves from pre-modern to modern to postmodern. In its architecture even. So you've got a real kind of a visceral capturing of this multi-dimensional evolutionary arc that the characters and the society and the culture and the archetypes are evolving. They're tetra-enmeshed, and tetra meaning 4, the 4 quadrants, for those of you who don't know. B Season, it's got to be on the list because it's one of the only integral films, one of the only films tested so far positive that has a female main character and a beautiful communion storyline. It really captures the communion. It's a masterpiece of zones. For those of you in integral theory, this is an advanced lens that the quadrants are split into 8 zones. And this film masterfully works with zones, and to the point where the text of the story and the subtext, they kind of shift so that as you're going through it, the subtext comes to the surface and the text goes down. It's taking cinematic consciousness and reversing it. So what we traditionally see as the text of the scene, the main storyline, you'll get these scenes where it's like what the characters are feeling actually feels like the top of the scene, not underneath. And what is normally ordinary life goes under in our awareness. And so that shift in consciousness is profound. Number 9, The Fountain, which is one of the first big favorites in the integral community. It kind of integrates the avant-garde expression in cinema with the popular. And it kind of melded them into a new cinematic language that is penetrating a larger audience. And finally, Inception, which is probably one of the first films to concretize altitudes and combines altitudes with states. The fact that was a very popular film is wonderful because it's using 5 layers of story. And at some points in the film, it's intercutting between 5 levels of story that the characters are existing in 5 levels of a dream. And their actions are so parallel, and it's intercutting. And the fact that our audiences went with that and grokked it, I don't know if everyone knows that word, sorry, really kind of grokked it and followed it is huge. So that's my list. Open the floor to questions for everything.
I think it was probably about in 2011, I had to look it up. There's a movie, I Am, and Tom Shadyac got an award for this because Loyola Marymount in their film school were deciding that they were going to try to make influentially positive movies and work on that. Is that related to showing integral?
Good question. Basically, we have at the same time that this movement of integral films is happening, we have spiritual cinema, more films that are trying to come from a positive message, overtly, like I Am, it's really. We have works that are more experiential, meditative, like Kayano Squatsi. I don't know if everyone has seen that. So we have these films coming out too. Now, I'm a firm believer in we need movies that are uplifting and help us to become enlightened and all that. And through my research, though, I've discovered that it's not just about the story. That as the medium evolves and that we're getting these films that are stretching our consciousness, the structures of our way of perceiving are just as important. I think that a film that is positive and enlightening could be that the story is, or that the subject matter is, or that it's designed to give you a higher level of consciousness or awareness or whatever. But looking at all the integral films that have tested positive for integral, even if it's a sad story, you get this feeling like there's more to life, and that there's a force that the evolutionary arc is good, that we have within us this drive to be better, you know, and that there is something. The integral films don't tend to call it God or anything. They tend to give us this sense of wonder, like an opening to this experience, that there is this force out there. You know, there is something higher.
Have you looked at only films made for adults, or have you explored any of the children's films?
I've explored
Like
some
Disney?
children's films and TV shows. The TV show Avatar, not the film, the TV show, the animated Nickelodeon show is integral, and its sequel is integral too.
To what extent do you think the makers of these films are conscious of the various levels that they're putting in? You're talking about consciousness, and one is the overlay that you're looking at the film and seeing it as integral. To what extent do you think the filmmakers are aware, maybe they don't use the word integral, but that they are aware and intentionally intend all the various things that you're pulling out of it?
I would say that there's a full spectrum here. Wachowskis are into integral theory. They study it, and they've tried to put it into their work consciously. And I would say that the people, you know, have no idea what integral is or thinking about it, and they're even just creating these stories. But if their consciousness, if like their cognitive line or their creative line is at integral, it's going to just naturally happen when they're writing stories. You know, they're going to be. What Depser has said about the integral stage is that the driving force is this need to integrate as many dimensions and perspectives as possible. And so when we're at the integral level as an artist, let's say, we will look at a story and try to get all the dimensions of it, as many as we can, you know, the subjective, you know, the objective, the relationships, the environment, you know, even time, you know, all of these, and see how they fit together. Not just have them all, but how do they relate? How do they work together? That's kind of like the drive that he saw as the heart of the integral structure. So if someone's at that structure, even if they don't know what that is, it's just natural.
So looking at a broader picture, have you explored any of the historical work in theater, say Shakespearean theater, or the predecessors to film, and how cultures were telling stories prior, and then tie that into the present moment where we have a fragmentation of media, everyone's got a small screen on their cell phone, smartphones, and things are dispersing. Do you have any insights kind of in that broader historical arc, not just the last 125 years of film?
Yeah. Well, I've mainly focused on that, but I have tried to put it in the context of the history of storytelling. But it's not just the history of storytelling. French sociologist, I think he is, Edgar Morin, is the only theorist I've read that has actually been an integral film theorist, and he wrote a couple of books on it. He looks at film from a different perspective, that basically our storytelling has evolved, you know, from cave paintings and how we communicate with others. And that film is actually the first to be able to concretize and reify all dimensions of our existence into a dream for others to dream. We picture things in our mind, imagine. Our imagination is like a film. When we close our eyes, we could picture something. And film is the first expressive medium to actually put that outside of our bodies. It's like taking how we imagine things, how we dream about them, how we picture them, and it puts them in front of us. And that, in and of itself, is a powerful catalyst for evolution, because it taps into the human imagination itself. That while our other forms of storytelling brought us to this point, they've evolved to this, and we are on the cusp of it going farther with virtual reality, which, according to my research, is an integral technology, because we will be able to concretize perspective taking itself.
The power of Christ compels you. Holy! Oh my God! The old man came out with me. Jesus Christ!
And what that can do for our consciousness. That's kind of perhaps bring us into even a stronger connection to integral. Yeah. Who's first? Let's see, I don't know.
I heard you say a little earlier about films testing positive for integral. My first thought would, if you wanted to find a place where people would be testing positive for integral, this would be probably a good place. But so maybe you could just say a little bit about what your criterion are and how you go about assessing a film. I'd be interested to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. That big kind of table that you saw is basically what I do. I look and I say, well, what's its polarity pattern? What is its ultimate truth process? Is it anchored in objective truth? Is it anchored in relative truth? Is it anchored in qualified? It's all these things. The man with the microphone.
My question is, isn't a movie and shadows on the wall, isn't that illusion? We're controlled by illusion. We're controlled by images. And there's something about virtual reality and things like that that are coming, I think, as distractions as much as they might be opening doors.
Yes, absolutely. Every tool that we create has its blessings and curses. A hammer could build a house or it could kill somebody. Mm-hmm. And then this medium is very powerful, and it's getting more and more powerful and more pervasive. And I think it's important for us to be more conscious of it, how it affects us, yes, it is an illusion, but what we want to do is to have it a conscious illusion that teaches us, that we use, and that we are aware when it's trying to manipulate us in a bad direction. So that's just, we have to be more conscious consumers of it, and hopefully by being able to see how film communicates through these structures of consciousness, we can understand it more and be more savvy spotters of it. It's a double-edged sword, because while it's true that we could get lost in it, and it could also affect how we relate to others if we get too far into it and all that. At the same time, it can be used for much higher things too. So we have to understand too, it's like art, great art, can actually make us more aware of things that we were unconscious of. So a lot of great films can do that. They can wake us up.
Yes, yes, yes.
So some can put us to sleep, some can wake us up. And we want to make ones that wake us up.
Thank you.
I'd love to understand more about what you're doing with this. You've written and made successful films, and are you acting as a consultant to filmmakers? Are you writing your own films or in script writing? Are you doing a combination of that? How are all this learning, how are you applying it in your professional life?
I'm doing consulting. I'm helping other filmmakers to apply this. One of the things I do is I work with individuals and organizations who want a specific effect. Like I worked with the University of Chicago Medical School. They wanted to create a multimedia intervention for teens at risk of suicide and depression. And they wanted to add video to their intervention. So I created a template for them to use through the different stages of the intervention. For example, if you're depressed, you're not really into doing that much. It's like, all right, and I don't really do anything. So your interactivity should be low. So what I helped them design is at the beginning of their intervention, it was very little interactivity that they had to do. And then we slowly had them becoming more and more interactive. So we're taking that tendency for them to not want to do anything and subtly help them be more active. That's just one level or stream, that we work with. So.
2 questions. One, how far down the list did Cloud Atlas test?
Cloud Atlas is actually, it tests high on the integral. But one of the things that's tricky now is that the percentage of the population at integral is not that big. So a pure integral film is actually not integral at this time. It's because it's not integrating with the current audience. It's not. So they were cinematically integral. I mean, the story was, but it was beyond the other levels. That maybe high pluralistic and integral, and that's great. And actually, we need that. But so it's like you have to kind of look at it in terms of the evolutionary arc of the world itself. So the reason why it's not on the list is because it hasn't had that profound effect because it was just speaking to its own audience. Whereas their new work, Sensate, would be on the list if this was also TV.
So,
A second question? Oh, in terms of future, what can you imagine? What themes? What meets the audience 5 years from now or 10 years? Anything on that?
What meets the audience?
Where they are? Where in 5 or 10 years? Where do you go with this?
Well, if the trajectory that I've seen continues, we will have more and more integral works going at higher levels. And VR is, to be honest with you, it's wide open. Each new moving image medium starts back at archaic and works their way up. And right now, VR is about to hit a wider penetration, but it's been around for a while in testing and research. So until I see where it comes out, like if it's coming out at Mythic or if it's coming out at Rational, then we could kind of track it. My guess is they'll be coming out probably somewhere around pluralistic, so we could have, it could be bringing us fast. Like there was one VR work where they created a VR documentary that took you into the life of, I think it was a 12-year-old girl in a Syrian refugee camp, a day in the life. And a lot of people who experienced it were transformed. When used that way, it's a profound tool. And just how soon will we be using it in that positive way and how much? Yeah.
I haven't heard you talk too much about the spiritual evolution of a protagonist or a culture. Could you say something about movies that take us from the gross to the subtle to the causal?
Inception. Inception beautifully plays with those levels and connects them to structures. It plays with structure states and all that. But one of the ways that also plays into the cinema, in 2001, Kubrick is working with the gross, subtle, and causal energetically in really beautiful ways. So it's not just in story, but cinematically he's working with different energies and different states too. But that's high. Those are that's rare because it's advanced, form. There are some transpersonal films that try to touch that, and those films tend to really focus on the spiritual. The integral films will have it, but as far as films that really focus on the spiritual, I haven't seen a lot of the integral films that put it up front. They integrate it as part of its whole universe. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Could you give some examples of that?
Tree of Life. Tree of Life. That's an integral film using transpersonal storytelling. It's focusing on the transcendent experience. It's focusing on the ethereal. And it's like the camera and we're coming from the spiritual dimension itself.
You might have already answered this, but which film do you think is the most effective for transforming the audience and then enlightening in that integral way? I watched The Sixth Sense when I was 15, and I was on psychedelic mushrooms.
I see people. They don't know they're dead.
And 5 years later, I'm into spirituality and Ken Wilber. So I feel like that could be my subconscious and then came up, and so that film must have been transformative for me. So.
That's a tricky thing. That's a tricky thing because it's the nexus of an individual's life. Like it's like films speak where our evolutionary path is when we see a film is key. Yeah. And it's like that's magical. We don't know. I mean, that's a great mystery because if you go to a film and you're on the cusp between rational and pluralistic, and that film actually is all about that shift, it could pop you. Yeah. But if you're not, you're not. So it's really kind of the context, where you're at. Yeah.
Were there any films personally to you that caused a shift? Speaking personally.
Yeah, God, where to begin? The biggest was me doing this research. I spoke to Ken about this, and it was like, basically, as I was testing these films, I started having these intense, like altered states, and like I mean, after I would test a film, like I would see it over and over again and test it and all that, and I would turn it off and I would go around and it would be like, I was seeing four quadrants everywhere. I was, everything was a hole on, and it kind of really I think what I discovered is that film is a very powerful way to viscerally get theory stuff. I also have a list I'm going to share with you too of great films to watch for each integral lens. So if you're into holons, The Sixth Sense is like, if you focus on holons and watch that, you'll go to the moon with holons. You'll get a really deep holonic experience. Quadrants, I Heart Huckabees. Levels, Groundhog Day. It's very visceral, kind of taking you through the circles of care and concern. Lines. I don't know if anyone has seen this film. It's a little out there. The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. It's basically this weird film where they have this traveling show where you enter this thing and you go into this altered reality, and what usually happens is whoever goes in, when they come out, they've shifted a level on a certain line of their development. States, altered states, of course. Types, source code. Source code is, on the surface, a boy movie, but it is this visceral integration of the masculine and feminine agency communion power. So it's a great way to kind of feel the agency and communion forces. And then we have zones, B season, which I've talked about, altitudes, Inception, energies, 2001: A Space Odyssey, subtle energies, gross energies. Methodologies, there's a little film called Everything is Illuminated, where the main character goes through first person, second person, and third person seeking, trying to understand. So it's this methodological journey that he goes on. Complexities, of course, is Cloud Atlas. Now, complexity lens, these last two lenses, complexities and archetypes, I've added on. Wilbur talks about them a little bit. Complexities, he calls tetraevolution. I use complexities because this is based on Edgar Morin's work. And he calls it complex thought. But basically, he's talking about tetraevolution. And Cloud Atlas is a great visceral. It's like, even if you don't understand it, whatever, you can actually feel the ping-ponging of different forces evolving and de-evolving. And then archetypes, the Dark Knight trilogy, which shows the evolution of an archetype and its effect on all the different dimensions and perspectives. Now, I've written a series on integral life that covers all these lenses up to and through methodologies. So if you're interested in this list, you could kind of read the article on holons, on the holonic lens, and then watch The Sixth Sense, if you want to play with it. Yeah.
I had a question about the development of younger people, kids, teenagers, and that they're exposed to some of these movies much younger than we may be, and how is that going to play out in their evolution?
Great point. And we had to deal with that with the study with the University of Chicago, because even though the classic stage for teenagers is one level, they're exposed to all these other different levels like no other, generation. And actually, a lot of the technologies we have now are integral convergence technologies. The iPhone was the first device to integrate all these different, a video camera, a phone, all these things together, and that actually affects our consciousness. And so our kids are getting the internet, are getting all the knowledge at once. So it can be very confusing, and that's one of the things we had to work with, in including the standard things that kids can get depressed about, especially peer pressure and all that. You've got this added mix in there of they are trying to absorb advanced stage stuff at a lower stage, and some are actually, their lines of development could be all over the place, even more. So.
Can I finish? My daughter is 13. She watches Doctor Who, and she's able to follow all these storylines. And for me, I'm like, wait, what?
Yes.
So the evidence I see in my daughter is that she gets stuff a lot faster. And of course, some of these lines of development, she's not going to be there for a while. But as far as being able to integrate multiple perspectives and multiple storylines and Sixth Sense for her, she's like, duh.
Yeah. The other part of that coin is that I believe that it's accelerating the evolutionary arc. Yeah. And so there's a big positive spin here in that we may be seeing the spiral speeding up. And a lot of these themes I believe, are helping that. Or you got the microphone, so start
the
with
mic. I was thinking in your talk, I was reminded of Marshall McLuhan's famous aphorism, "The medium is the message."
Yeah.
And you're kind of expanding that into media technologies being the method, and even your remark about virtual reality technology as being particularly integrative, just by the nature of the media itself and the integration of multiple senses. I just wanted to ask if you had any riffs on McLuhan's insights. I mean, he may have been a prophet of
definitely
part of your own insights into cinema.
Yeah, yeah. What's one of the things that have blown me away doing this, a lot, this has all blown me away. One of the things was how the structures of consciousness are everywhere. It's in the medium itself. It's in how the medium evolves. It's in how it bifurcates, so like film splits into film and TV, video games come up, and it makes perfect sense. Because if it's true that we all have these dimension perspectives and we have an evolutionary impulse and all these stages are part of us and they evolve, then it would make sense that they permeate everything. And it's not just ourselves or how we perceive the world, but it's what we create. And and so what we create is evolving through these stages too.
We have time for one more question. Sperry?
I spent the evening with this anthropologist once, and he talked about how the cave paintings in Lascaux in France, that the tribe would walk with the torch past, and illuminate a portion of the wall where they had made all these paintings, and it created the first motion picture for the tribe to come to a commonly sensed consciousness and be in focus, so that when they went out and hunted, they would be more organized and collaborative. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's like before film, but before that film of the horse, there was the flip book. That they would have drawings and you would flip them and there would be this movement, And so that was the precursor. So it's like, it could be that we are evolving from those cave paintings to the holodeck, where we create multiple realities. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the holodeck concept. Virtual reality is like a cave painting for the holodeck. You walk into this room and you're in another world, literally, like it's real, Yeah. So it's like we're creating these virtual worlds that potentially can get more and more real, and we don't know what's after that. And some sci-fi theorists, would say, after that, our consciousness transcends the physical form and we enter other dimensions or whatever. And maybe, according to Timothy Leary, these tools are helping us evolve towards that. That our storytelling tools are evolving more and more to imagined worlds becoming real and for us to transcend the matrix itself.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I don't think any of us are going to be able to look at movies the same way after tonight. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this evening.
Evolutionary guidance media? Evolutionary guidance media?